Henry Morgenthau Sr., this first slide sums up his what he's primarily known for. His main role was as U.S. ambassador to the Ottoman Empire from 1913 to 1916. During that time, the United States was still a neutral power in the First World War. His influence was as follows. Partly at Morgenthau's urging, the United States joined the Allies in 1917. His influence as ambassador also was, and this is perhaps what he's most well known for, he went outside the ambassadorial role in attempting to stop the Ottoman government from exterminating the Armenian people, and he informed the world of what was going on. The US government under Wilson did not object to his efforts, but they also didn't encourage him or help him with it. History's judgment of Henry Morgenthau Sr. is that his actions gained him love and respect with the Armenian people that is very alive today. And among United States and European historians, they regard him very positively. The exception is a subset of primarily Turkish historians who support the denialist story of denial of committing the Armenian genocide by the Turkish government. Next slide, please. Earliest background. He was born into a well-off family in 1856 in Mannheim, Germany. A well-off, comfortable family. He then experienced some significant change and loss. At the age of 9 in 1866, his father, who was suddenly ruined financially, moves the family from Germany to Brooklyn. His family's development once in Brooklyn was that his father overspent and his mother had to take in boarders. Now, as this was going on in his life, there was the background of the Armenian genocide was underway. The subject Armenian peoples, especially the Christian peoples, the subject Ottoman peoples, especially the Christians, began to demand self-determination and rights. The trend took off with the 1820s Greek War of Independence from the Ottoman Empire, and they were successful in large part. Morgenthau's own life parallels this demand for self-determination and rights in the way that a 14-year-old might begin to put it. And that began with his, back please to the last slide just for a moment. It started with his commitment to be in charge of himself and be good. And here is the proof of that. When he was 14, he wrote in one of his 3 wonderful later books, I composed 24 rules of action, tabulating virtues that I wish to acquire and vices that I must avoid. I even made a chart of these maxims and every night marked against myself whatever breaches of them I had been guilty of. Indulgence in sweets, departures from strict veracity, too much talking, extravagance, idleness, and vanity, a heavy indictment. The fact is that I had acquired an almost monastic habit of mind and loved the conquest of my impulses. Next slide, please. So what else shaped this man long before his ambassadorial assignment? He was very loved by both his parents, and he continued the love towards them, especially to his mother. And his losses, he went through major losses, especially for a kid. He lost a secure, comfortable home in Germany, blissful childhood experiences there, even though he records that he incurred some anti-Semitism. And once in the United States, he learned about how important friendship was. And he became a friend of a hunchback Quaker doctor in Brooklyn who taught him kindness and compassion as he assisted this Quaker doctor in his practice. Here he is some years later with his fiancée. Next slide, please. So two characteristics that he developed before his ambassadorial assignment. One was tolerance. As a teenager, he pursued religious tolerance by visiting Christian churches in order to gain understanding. And I believe myself that his ultimate value as a public person was caring about the fate of the Jewish people as his people and growing into caring equally for all people as such. Next slide. Now, in the 19th century, what was going on in the Ottoman Empire was that things got a little better and then they got worse. Sultan Abdul Hamid approved a constitution finally, having been pressured by so many of his subjects. And the constitution made all his subjects equal citizens. But for the Armenians, it was no go. Their situation got worse. And in recognition of this, a treaty came out of the Congress of Berlin, which provided for the Armenians to have autonomy in Eastern Turkey, where most of the discrimination, terrible discrimination against them was taking place because the majority of Armenians who were peasants lived in that part of Turkey. But the Sultan was not happy with the way things were going, and he suspended the constitution for the next 30 years. But no matter what he did, the empire continued to slide downward. And meanwhile, there were newly formed Muslim political parties. People wanted representation and participation. And these active political parties strongly blamed the Sultan, and they organized against him. Nonetheless, the discrimination against Armenians increased. And by the 1890s, the Christian Armenians are subjected to very, very large and smaller massacres, especially in the East. And I understand there might have been 100,000 of them killed at that time. Next slide, please. Now, the massacres went on. And in 1909, there was another large massacre of Armenians in Adana in southern Turkey. And this shows a picture of the terrible destruction in the Armenian quarter. Then came the Ottoman Empire in worse shape, the Balkan Wars, and then the World War I starts. Next slide, please. By 1914, Morgenthau was installed as ambassador in Constantinople, which is what he called it. It was also called Istanbul. And he went to Palestine quite quickly. The Jews of Palestine were in trouble because the Jews there and Jews elsewhere were worried that the Ottoman Jews might be on the Ottomans' list for extermination. There was a rumble about the extermination of the Armenians from numerous diplomats, and there was a lot of concern, and it extended to the Jews. And the Turks cut these Jews' communication from the outside world, and they feared the economic strangulation from that cutting would lead to their end. So in New York City, the American Jewish Committee put together some $50,000 in gold for these Jews and sent it to Morgenthau in Constantinople. And my grandfather, Maurice Wertheim, was traveling. He was in Constantinople at the time. My great-grandfather gave it to him, the gold. He put it in his satchel and carried it to the Jews in Palestine. This picture shows Henry Morgenthau and his wife in Palestine. Next slide, please. Now, April 24th was the start date officially. Armenians have designated that as the start of the Armenian genocide. There was plenty of killing before that, but this is the main start date. Next slide, please. And this shows how Armenians were assembled before deportation, because one of the methods for genocide was to send them on death marches from wherever they were in Turkey south to the Syrian desert. And they were called death marches because most of them died before that. Now, in the slide before this, we saw dead Armenians lying on the ground. They were taken out of their towns and villages and simply shot. as well. That was another method, just shooting in cold blood. And then the next slide, please. This shows them marching from places in Turkey to the Syrian desert. They're in a line because the people on horseback were Turkish officials and military officers who kept them in line, shot them whenever they wanted. And in the meantime, the Kurds came down from the mountains and picked through the corpses to take the jewelry out. And you should know that the Ottoman government told the Armenians they were being deported temporarily, that they'd be able to return and have their property. They never meant that. The Ottomans took every bit of property and finances away from them, down to wanting the money from their policies for if they were to die, insurance policies in New York. They asked my great-grandfather to insure the money for them. Of course, he didn't do it, but they took absolutely everything and have never given anything back. Next slide, please. Here is a bunch of Armenian widows and children, probably in Syria, I don't know. Next slide. So who was Morgenthau to the Armenians? And I would say in summary, he was famous for acting outside of his official remit, based on the values of decency and respect for non-Jewish peoples. He tried to persuade the heads of the Ottoman government not to murder and not to exterminate the Armenians. And he appealed to the State Department to act, not successfully either. But he inspired the raising of considerable sums and goods to help save the Armenians through the Near East Relief Foundation. And it exists today and still raises money for people there. Next slide, please. So he resigned his post in 1916. He was disheartened, literally. He talks about that, from being unable to stop the genocide. And when he returned, he continued to spread the truth of what was going on, not only to the US government, but to the world. He was in touch with the New York Times and so on, and to develop the Near East, the relief for the Near East. Next slide. And my last slide. I ask all of you to consider, what was the essence of this Morgenthau? What attitudes would he have today, not in 1948, but today, were he the US ambassador to Israel? How would he feel regarding the 20% of Palestinian citizens of Israel being treated as second-class citizens, and the maintenance of an occupation and the permitting of settlements in the West Bank through the destruction, among other things, of Palestinian farms and olive groves? Thank you.